great to see everybody here. It's nice to be able to get to see old friends and colleagues again.
And our residents as well. You know, what we
30 stories worth of fire hose seems like a lot, doesn't it?
Anybody wants to talk to Tom or I about what that looks like?
Looking at penetrations, looking at the fire stopping elements we're putting in buildings.
That's another sort of energy sustainable technology that sort of is great but works against us. It also burns the grass in my yard.
Hi everyone, thanks for your time today. My name's Jim Foran. I'm the founder and CEO of PVStop International. Our mission is to make solar energy safe, and I'm here today to talk a little about one of the electrical generators in the green ecosystem, which is solar panels. So solar panels can't be switched off. As long as they're exposed to light, they continue to produce potentially lethal amounts of DC electricity. In professional terms, this is known as the DC danger zone. And up until recently, there's been no practical solution to this globally recognised problem. So how big is the problem? Let's take a bit of a look.
Surprising impediment to firefighters, solar panels.
10, a Fox 40 investigation into solar panel fire hazards for
solar panels. They're good for the environment, but it appears they're bad for firefighters.
There is a hidden hazard that firefighters call a growing concern.
Firefighters having a very tough time putting out the blaze. Why? Solar panels. This big study saying solar panels cannot be easily de-energized. They are inherently a fire truck.
So this is a very real problem. That was just from the US, but the same similar incidents are going on all around the world and growing exponentially with the growth in photovoltaics. Here's an example of what can happen when a solar panel array experiences an arc fault and the junction box blows, releasing toxic nanoparticles into the environment, which is not good for the environment and not very good for anything downstream. There's been testing done on the toxic nanoparticles released by burning solar panels, and it can cause silicosis of the lungs. So first responders should always be wearing their self-contained breathing apparatus when operating around burning solar panels. So a bit of a market overview. Currently in the UK, there's over 1.2 million solar panel installations. Professor G really nailed it earlier when he talked about blind spots. This data I've just put up here, a 500% increase in solar panel incidents in Australia in the past 3 years. That seems pretty dramatic, but that was a consequence of me working with the Australian Fire Services and actually getting a reporting field for PV included in the National Incident Reporting Data. Now, in most countries around the world, there isn't even a reporting field for PV. So there's a lot of opinions going around, but we do need better evidence-based data, and that comes from starting with having a reporting field. Even if we have the reporting field, that'll pick up incidents directly caused by solar panels, but currently there's no data picking up where the solar panel system isn't the cause. It's an unrelated ignition point, but then the panels become involved. So there's a lot of data we're still missing. And as you can see from this graph, we're still at the infancy of the adoption of PV. Although it seems like it's everywhere, we've got a long way to go. And with this exponential growth, we're seeing an equivalent exponential growth in the number of incidents around the world. We need better data. In Australia, the Clean Energy Regulator have been doing audits on small-scale PV installations since 2011. And from 2011 till now, month in, month out, they're reporting around 3 to 4% of solar installations are dangerous, and a further 17% are substandard, which is dangerous, waiting to happen as these deteriorate by exposure to the elements. So effectively, 1 in 5 installations in Australia is dangerous or substandard, and I have no reason to believe that this will be very different anywhere else in the world, because it's exactly the same technology. So the objectives today is to understand how solar PV systems work, what goes wrong with them. We'll look at some of the risks associated with the DC danger zone. I'll talk a bit about the product that we've created, some data, some stats and some recommendations, and just a bit of a look at how this impacts the standard operating procedures of first responders. So without giving you too much of a lesson, I'll keep this brief. Volts times amps equals watts. Watts is the power output. A power point in the wall produces approximately 230 volts at 10 amps or 2,300 watts or 2.3 kilowatts. Remove either volts or amps and you have no power. Why that's important, I'll explain a little bit later. So understanding the problem, the differences between AC and DC electricity. Alternating current flows or vibrates backwards and forwards at what's called a frequency. In the UK, that's 50 cycles a second or 50 hertz. AC electrical sources can be remotely detected. First responders have a device called an AC hot stick, which enables them to determine whether AC electrical source is live without actually touching or engaging with it. And it works by picking up that frequency. It's easily switched, and it's basically the predominant power source in any building. DC direct current. That current's always trying to flow from source to load. There is no frequency. Currently, there is no remote detector for DC electricity. There's no DC hot stick. There's a couple of companies working on it, but nothing's been proven to be effective as yet. DC does not like being switched. Every time you switch DC, it arcs onto the switching mechanism. So it doesn't like being switched. It doesn't like any connection points, relays, anything that's interrupting that path from source to load is a potential point of weakness. The average size of even a domestic solar panel system in the UK is somewhere between 4 and 6 kilowatts. And as we all know, you don't want to stick a knife into a power outlet, yet I see people every day crawling on solar panels which are putting out sometimes 2-3 times that potential energy, oblivious to the potential risks. Just a quick look at the physiological effects of DC on the human body. There's always a bit of philosophical debate on what's more dangerous, the AC or DC. Effectively, the way I see it in the real world, it's an argument like what's worse, being hit by a speeding bus or hit by a speeding car. Neither of them are particularly good for you. But in basically at 200 milliamps of DC, you're starting to get that lock-on effect. And at above 500 milliamps, you start to get deep cell damage. You're locked on. Cardiac arrest is possible or likely. So essentially, 500 milliamps or half an amp is all that's required to be fatal for a human. So PV, photovoltaic, light, electricity. Each cell in a solar panel produces 0.6 of a volt. It doesn't matter if it's a small cell or a large cell, they all produce 0.6 of a volt. The size of the cell determines the amperage. The bigger the cell, the higher the amps. Those cells are wired in series to create a panel. Those panels are then daisy-chained together to create a string. Solar panels can be anything from 1 watt up to some of the latest ones are now over 600 watts in a single panel. By law, I think a domestic system in the UK, you can only have up to 600 volts connected in series or in a string. And for a utility commercial array, you can have up to 1500 volts in a string. Once you get to that limit, you then create a second and third string, wire them together in parallel to increase the overall output of the PV system. There's predominantly, well, there is only 3 types of solar PV systems. Grid interactive, this is the most common. This is where the system is connected into the grid. Your domestic systems, factories, etc., solar farms, almost all grid interactive. You've got off-grid, traditionally in remote locations where grid power is not available or expensive, which is a combination of solar panels and battery storage, all in a self-contained system. And the latest innovation, the hybrid system, which is basically panels, a smaller battery storage system connected to the grid, the best of both worlds. Here's just a couple of pictures of a typical domestic system, that's around 5 kilowatt system, and a much larger commercial installation. Both work on exactly the same principle, except for a domestic system, that's a single string. The factory is a number of strings connected in parallel to increase that overall output of the system. Just a quick schematic of how solar works. So sun hits the panels, creates DC electricity instantaneously, which then goes down into an inverter. That inverter converts the DC into AC, which then goes to power the house, and any excess produced goes to into the grid, and that's how people get their feed-in tariffs, etc. It's typically a circuit breaker or isolation switch. Depending on the country and the standard, that can be located up near the roof in Australia, for instance. Most countries have it located down somewhere in the vicinity of the inverter. And there is still a widely held misconception that if you turn that switch off, the whole system is safe. In fact, anything downstream of that switch is off, but anything upstream of that switch, being the panels and the wiring leading to that switch, are still live and dangerous. Reasons for system failure. Physical damage, branches falling onto panels, cracking the panels, vermin damage, rats chewing at the wiring, weather events, lightning, hail, water ingression. These are all common factors, but as I alluded to earlier, by far the most common reason for PV system failure is poor quality system componentry or poor quality installation. And note that even if solar panels are damaged, they will still produce some form of power up until all the cells are destroyed. So they can be still quite damaged and still produce quite a lot of power. Here's just some examples of real world issues. Here's a couple of burnt isolation switches. As I said, DC does not like to be switched. Even when it's designed for it, the number one cause of solar panel fires probably around the world is burning isolation switches. Water ingression, flooding, these are all common factors, especially in Australia. We've been having a few floods over the last few years. Hail is another big one. Hail impacting, creating cracks. Those cracks create hotspots, which then can create electrical arcs, which can then create rooftop fire risk. Here's a couple of examples on the left here. A perfect example of where the solar panels didn't cause the incident, but they became involved. As you can see, that wiring underneath is damaged. As long as those panels are receiving light, that's producing DC electricity into that damaged wiring. On the right was a good example, good case study. This was Tacker Plastics in Sydney back in 2018 after a huge hailstorm. It's about 900 panels on the roof. The system owner did all the right things, activated their isolation switches, thought they were safe. 3 days later, the weather improved, 30-degree day. Those damaged, one section of the panels where it was damaged started arcing, created a fire, and just fortunately it was a metal roof. It didn't penetrate the factory roof. But first responders, all they could do is turn up, treat it defensively and wait for it to burn itself out. Not a great not a great solution. We're seeing more and more incidents all around the world. Here's Long Island on the left. As you can see, that's probably under some of the older regulations. I think that's quite crazy. You've got an electrical generator there without regular access points. How are you going to maintain your system? There's no way you can get anywhere near the wiring in those middle sections of the panels. And as you can see, hasn't been checked. That's how a fire starts, and all you can do is sit back and watch it burn. We've had examples with, what have we got? The Apple data center in Arizona on the right. We've had IKEA having a number of incidents around the world. Quite a famous one in the US, Walmart. Tesla did 263 installations on Walmart facilities around the country. Within 12 months, there were 7 rooftop fires at Walmart due to poor quality installations. Walmart sued Tesla, made them remove all of those systems. So once again, human error. This was a really interesting one for us. We sold our product into the New York Fire Department, and this was a new incident type for us. It's an off-grid electric vehicle charging station fire. So the FDIC were called to the incident. The battery had already exploded and was just continuing to burn. They attempted to put it out with water. It extinguished, but then reignited and started burning again. They used foam, extinguished it. It flared up again. They used our product. I'm jumping a bit ahead, but they sprayed our product onto the panels, which blocked the light, stopped the electrical generator feeding the damaged and exploded battery. Then they used foam again, extinguished the battery, and it stayed extinguished because it was no longer being fed from the solar panels. So that was a really interesting one for us.
Book your tickets now for the 8th International Tall Building High Rise Fire Safety Conference, taking place alongside FDIC in Indianapolis, US, on the 15th to the 17th of April 2024. 3 days of world-class speaker presentations, debates and networking. Book your tickets via the website www.tallbuildingfiresafety.com. Early bird discount tickets will be available. The Tall and High-Rise Building Fire Safety Management course is ideal for anyone who has responsibility for fire safety management in tall and high-rise buildings. It is a 5-day intensive course with world-class instructors. You can get full details of the course on our website www.tallbuildingfiresafety.com.
So the DC danger zone, it's the wiring, or the panels and the wiring leading from the solar panels to that first point of isolation. There's the potential for fire, electric shock, falling from height. There's up until recently no safe or reliable means of isolating the power. And standard operating procedures were either to try and cover it with a tarp, which you don't want to be sending people up onto the roof to try and manhandle these things, especially if they're on fire, or to treat defensively. There are other safety technologies and innovations that are widely adopted in the market. I've talked about isolation switches, but DC doesn't like being switched. Most inverters have now inbuilt anti-arcing equipment. And then there's been a big move towards rapid shutdown type PV systems, which is microinverters, DC optimizing equipment, which has actually been legislated in the US under National Energy Code 690.12. These are all attempts to improve safety, but none solve the fundamental problem of switching off the generator at the source of production. They all operate downstream of the panel itself. So how do you turn off solar panels? You block the light. Light is the source of power. And that's why we invented our product PVStop. It's a state-of-the-art polymer film technology. It sprays onto solar panels like a liquid tarpaulin. Because it's used in life risk environments, it's fire retardant in its wet state, it's non-flammable in its dry state, it's non-conductive, it's anti-arcing, it encases the panel and stops those toxic nanoparticles from being released into the environment. It's environmentally friendly, and from a system owner's perspective, post-incident, if the solar panels aren't the cause of the issue, it can simply be peeled off to reactivate the system without damaging the system. So I'll just give you a quick example of how it works.
Procedure for covering the panels with PVStop and making the solar system panel array safe. Note the number of light globes connected
Volts
to the
times
demonstration
amps
unit,
equals watts.
allowing
Watts
you to see
is
that
the
the
power.
system
Watts, keep
is
your eye
under an
on the watts
electrical
figure.
load. This dashboard will measure in real time the reduction of power as PVStop is applied. The first step is to spray PVStop horizontally across the centre of a panel array. Note that even the panels are only partially covered. The output is reduced to safe levels in a matter of seconds, and the light globes switch off.
So you don't actually need to fully cover. That 40% coverage is breaking the circuit. The next step is to completely cover the panels, giving you additional peace of mind that the system is totally safe. With an air temperature of 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit, PVStop is touch dry within minutes and creates a waterproof coating. Once completely dry, peel it off, or it can sit on your panels for up to 12 months or until you're ready to reactivate your system again. So that 40% coverage, how that works is the cells that aren't covered are still producing voltage, but having covered that 40%, you're breaking the circuit. There's no amperage. So even though you'll have residual voltage in the panels, you've got no amps. So you can have 60, 70 volts times 0 amps equals 0 power output. So one of the concerns of first responders, they just need simple solutions. And knowing that they don't have to cover every square inch to ensure they're safe is a fundamental benefit. As you saw, we used it in an extinguisher vessel, which is just a pragmatic solution, fits on existing vehicles in existing brackets. But for hard to access, dangerous to access solar farm scale applications, there are limitations to the extinguishers, and so we've also now produced a drone delivery system, which is a bit of fun. So this is just a bit of a look at one of our earlier prototypes. So literally the drone can fly across the panels, crop dust with PVStop and make safe. That has a 16-litre payload capacity. Our latest drone has a 40-litre payload capacity, which can cover 200 square metres of panels in a single flight. And I'm also looking at this very much for the BIPV, so your green panelling. You're starting to see solar panels are integrated into the cladding on the side of the buildings. That's the latest thing we're starting to look at because we see that as another emerging risk around the world. Enough of that. The product's been supported by ISO 14034. We've had a host of testing on the product around the world. All of this is publicly available and happy to share if you're interested. Statistics and data, there have been firefighter injuries recorded in the Switzerland, the UK and the US, but once again, the data is very scarce. So I know it's being underreported. BRE have probably done the best research of this type. They did a 3-year project that logged 58 incidents where 9 injuries occurred. But once again, even they say that the data was very limited and not easily accessible. In San Francisco in 2015, there were a couple of firefighters injured when they sprayed an unbroken stream of water onto a damaged system and they got electrocuted up the water stream. Not badly injured, they were released from hospital, but once again, just another example of unanticipated risk. I'm quite often asked how many solar panels are dangerous. Unfortunately, the first fatality directly attributed to solar panels happened in Dubai in 2018. It wasn't a first responder, it was just a member of the public. But ironically, it was a 2-panel system on a caravan. So once again, we talked about the Swiss cheese effect earlier. If you get the wrong alignment of issues in the wrong set of circumstances, 2 panels is enough to be fatal. Bit of news from around the world. London Fire Brigade were the first international agency to adopt or trial our product PVStop. That was very successful. It's now been added to the automatic replenishment system, so it's being more widely used across the LFB. And based on the success there, we're also in about half of the UK fire brigades. Learnings from the PVStop experience have been put forward to the National Operational Learning Group, and some of the learnings from our solution are now being incorporated into the National Operational Guidance System, which is really exciting. In Singapore, our product is now on every fire truck in Singapore. Talking about the environmental credentials, PUB, which is the Singapore National Water Agency, have a big floating solar farm on the country's drinking water reservoir. They wanted to use our product as a risk mitigation for that, but they were concerned about overspray getting into drinking water and what would be the impacts of that. I certainly wasn't going to try and validate that, so we sent them samples of the product. They did all of their own independent testing, and I'm happy to say they've now approved our product for use on their drinking water reservoir. So I think that really speaks to the credentials and the environmental properties of what we do. Oh, and Singapore are now making or proposing amendments to the fire code and looking to mandate a similar product. They can't talk about PVStop in a standard, but an isolating coating medium to be mandatory on all commercial, industrial and utility PV installations in Singapore. So that's a great step forward. In the US, New York Fire Department now using the product. I showed you that new incident type earlier with the electric vehicle charging station. There's 116,000 of those in the US at the moment. There'll be 2.3 million in the next couple of years. So once again, if we can get ahead of the problem and have a solution on hand to help them mitigate that, that would be great. We're now getting orders across, I think there's 27,000 fire departments now in the US. So yeah, we're getting pretty busy over there. And FDNY, looking at all the emerging risks associated with green energy, the Biden administration have basically committed $400 billion in funding to the growth of renewables over the next 10 years. It's a lot, and we're starting to see, as has been, plenty of examples today, the number of incidents, whether it be solar, especially battery storage, it's creating a huge problem. And New York Fire Department and the fire departments across the US are going to bring this to a real focus next year. They're going to be inviting 14,000 attendees from federal, state, government, all the fire departments, and they'll be inviting a lot of international guests for a 2 or 3 day symposium purely on green energy hazards, and requesting that government step up to give first responders the education, the training and the tools to start to be able to more effectively mitigate these risks. So we've got to ask ourselves, do we have the right tools and the right systems of work to create a safe environment? I get asked a lot, when do you use our product? It can be used preemptively before an incident. This was a good case study from the Netherlands just a few months ago. A resident phoned up the fire department, reporting burning smell coming from the roof. Fire department turned up. There wasn't a fire, but they used their infrared detector and determined that one of the panels had a hot spot, was starting to arc, and they could preemptively apply PVStop to the system, shut it down, hand it back to the owner or responsible person in a safe manner. Job done. And then it's up to the insurance company or the electrical technician to come and repair and do a health check system to prevent further rooftop risk. London Fire Brigade have now had over, from what I understand, over 20 operational uses of the product. Great example here. Once again, the panels didn't cause the incident, but it was a fire in a toilet block downstairs, got into the roof. The wiring was damaged. They couldn't safely access the roof because of the electrical risk. Applied PVStop, made that safe. They could then get into the roof with water, save the building. Similar incident at a terrace fire. There's plenty of examples of this. This is a really interesting example out of Australia not long ago, where there was a big factory fire, wasn't started by the panels. The entire factory was compromised. At the end of the incident, the building needed to be demolished, but the roof wasn't not safe to get on the roof. And the problem was, how do we demolish the building with a live electrical generator on the roof? The utility didn't have any idea what to do, contacted us, we supplied them with the product, make the panels safe, then they could safely demolish the building. So there's a number of either pre-incident, during incident, post-incident, where the product can have some benefit. So although my presentation's been really focused here on how solar works, a bit about our product and first responder procedures, I think we've got to ask ourselves, why is all the onus on first responders to make these systems safe? And I would challenge that the commercial, industrial, utility system owners should be taking some responsibility and working closely with the fire departments. I believe they should have the actual tools on site ready for first responders to utilise, and in community safety programs, doing things like sharing the electrical schematics of the solar panels with the first responders, where equipment's located, safe access points to really close that community safety loop. So in summary, the exponential growth of solar has created unanticipated risks. There is no silver bullet. We provide one tool in the toolbox, but its education, its training, and its tools are essential to improving outcomes. Our goal is to play a significant part in influencing a better and improved safety around the world in the green fire ecosystem. And I'd ask all of you in this room for your help, raise awareness, and keep pushing back on authorities to generate better data. And together we can all improve environmental safety and a greener future. Thank you.
Book your tickets now for the 8th International Tall Building High Rise Fire Safety Conference, taking place alongside FDIC in Indianapolis, US, on the 15th to the 17th of April 2024. 3 days of world-class speaker presentations, debates and networking. Book your tickets via the website www.tallbuildingfiresafety.com. Early bird discount tickets will be available. The Tall and High-Rise Building Fire Safety Management course is ideal for anyone who has responsibility for fire safety management in tall and high-rise buildings. It is a 5-day intensive course with world-class instructors. You can get full details of the course on our website www.tallbuildingfiresafety.com.